Make sure you guys hit the subscribe button if you guys are enjoying the content that we're throwing up. And make sure you guys hit the like button if you enjoy the video. And yeah, let's begin. Okay, so I want to talk, getting into the newest one of the newest story about Superman. What I want to do here is I want to talk about the Crime Syndicate for a second, right? Because the way the story's transpired so far is that Jonathan Kent's kind of just been like thrown into these crazy circumstances where he was literally thrust into like Earth 3, right? Which is basically a universe where everything is backwards, right? Like everything that's normally good in the main DC universe is evil, right? So instead of the Justice League of America, you have the Crime Syndicate of America. And while the character roles do change in terms of like Owlman versus, Batman instead of Batman and things like that, Superwoman, which is played by Lois Lane instead of like, Supergirl by, with Kara Zor-El. The way this kind of plays out is it's I guess really Wonder Woman, with Diana Prince. The way this plays out is kind of intriguing. And I want to sort of offer some explanation here. So when it comes to the Crime Syndicate and what a lot of you guys probably saw in terms of the reviews regarding Bendis's whole, this set of events, is a lot of people are saying it doesn't make any sense. The Crime Syndicate shouldn't be here. And here's the reason why. So in the New 52, when DC rebooted back in 2011, there was this kind of ongoing set of events that were happening behind the scenes, sort of under the current, that we would get these little snapshots of that led into Darkseid War. And so this really kind of came to a head with regards to the Crime Syndicate during the events of Forever Evil. And the way this happened was that the Crime Syndicate essentially like invaded the main DC universe. It really wasn't until you started getting further into the story and into the meat and potatoes of everything, the way you discover was that the Anti-Monitor had shown up on Earth in Earth 3 and was basically like wreaking havoc and really kind of like obliterated everything and sent the Crime Syndicate fleeing for their lives, and they invaded the main DC universe, which is why Forever Evil happened. Now, at the end of that story, when the Crime Syndicate was ultimately defeated, for the most part, like it kind of led into different story arcs, right? So like the ring that belonged to Power Ring, who's basically played by, who's kind of like a cowardly version of Hal Jordan, basically passed itself off to Jessica Cruz, who became like the new Green Lantern, right? Which is the one that you see right now in DC Comics. But the idea was that with regards to characters like Superwoman, with Ultraman, with like Owlman, they were kind of holdovers, right? Like they were just, like the event ended, they were just kind of left in prison, and we didn't really know what was going to happen with them. By various circumstances, they were basically eliminated, but like Dr. Manhattan killed Owlman, different things like that. But essentially, DC Universe Rebirth #1 tied up all the loose ends. The Crime Syndicate was, by all standards of measurement, gone. Like they were effectively eliminated. And so this is them kind of like returning. It's basically been to saying like the Crime Syndicate's back on Earth 3. The issue with this is that there's no explanation of how they got there. As far as we're aware, there's not been any kind of a reboot, right? Like it's not like their universe was recreated. There's no indication that happened. Instead, what it seems to be is Bendis kind of telling a story saying, I want to use a Crime Syndicate, so now they're here. Now, the reality is that, well, I really kind of think like most people are jumping the gun, right? Like most people are just kind of like, this is Bendis being Bendis, and that kind of a thing. The truth is that we don't really know because Doomsday Clock hasn't ended, and we don't know what kind of effect that's going to have on the DC universe. And so with that being the case, like it could be one of these things where Bendis is really kind of like essentially spoiling the ending of Doomsday Clock. That like the way Doomsday Clock is going to end, like Dr. Manhattan's going to go back and undo what he did, and that means that like Darkseid War never happened, and like Anti-Monitor never invaded Earth 3, and there's like all these things that could come out of that. Or it could be that the naysayers are actually right, that it's basically Bendis just kind of ignoring all continuity for the purpose of just wanting to do Earth 3. We don't know. But the fact remains that this is the first time Jonathan Kent's actually facing off against the Crime Syndicate. And that's an important thing. And the reason why is because where everybody goes to attack him, it's actually Ultraman who takes him and then whisks him away. And where Jonathan Kent looks at him, of course, because Ultraman is an alternate universe counterpart to Superman, he looks exactly like his father. And it takes a minute or two for like Jonathan to realize this is not my dad. And Ultraman really begins to kind of talk to him directly. Now, Ultraman really seems to kind of take a special interest in John and basically say like, there's nobody coming for you. There's nobody going to save you. It's really kind of a twisted set of circumstances in terms of him kind of manipulating John and then like tearing him down. And where John tries to escape, tries to get away, one of the things he realizes is that there's no sun, there's no yellow sun in this universe. Like it's just kind of them. So it's a strange scenario because the indication seems to be that like, if there is no sun there, well then one, how in the world does Earth exist? And two, like, how does all this kind of come together? It's really Bendis sort of playing with things. And the reason why is because Earth 3 was never fully explored by DC. It's really Bendis just kind of doing what he wants here because he can. But the overall gist of this is that Jonathan Kent is essentially like his powers are kind of going away. And the reason why is because it's not really Bendis pulling anything out of his backside. It's because this is how Superman works, right? Like Superman is a battery. So it's like taking a car battery and sitting it on concrete. You leave it there long enough and it's gonna drain. And so it's basically the same thing with Superman, right? You take Superman or any of the Kryptonians who are powered by a yellow sun, and you remove them from a yellow sun. As time progresses, they'll begin to lose their powers because that solar energy in their cells will start to deplete. But when John is kind of recalling this story to his father, and his father says, well, how long were you there? John just doesn't really give an answer because the indication is that he doesn't seem to know, or at least if he does, he's not spilling the beans right now. Instead, it's just, he's been there for a long time. And what Ultraman does is bring him things like pigs, basically the ability to kind of like feed himself, but that's really it. He's like literally stuck in the middle of a volcano out in the middle of nowhere. And so it's kind of interesting because Ultraman then shows up here and basically says, hey, look, I kind of have, I've been thinking about this for the last few days, and I kind of have a question. Your father, as you know him, is a guy that you love and you trust and you care about. He's everything to you, but I wear this face and I'm stuck in what amounts to a universe that really is in a lot of ways akin to hell. And if that's the case, then maybe you're here to be tested. Maybe you're here to be tested, to test your potential. That was the whole idea behind you going out into space with your grandfather anyway, was to test your abilities. And it happened to be that like you ended up here in Earth 3 separated from Jor-El. And so if that's the case, then maybe you're here for the purpose of testing me. And that's where we really kind of get this interesting development with Ultraman, because what Jonathan says is all he would do is talk about himself. He would show up and talk about himself all the time. He would cry, different things like that. And that's not something that we usually see from Ultraman. Most depictions of Ultraman as a character in DC Comics is that he's just an evil version of Superman. He would just show up and he would do some really, really crappy things. And then maybe it takes, Earth 2 Superman and Earth 1 Superman teaming up to defeat him. Maybe it's just the main DC Universe Superman defeating him on his own. Whatever the case is, we've only ever really seen him as like a violent and vindictive person. We know the Earth, that like the Crime Syndicate is screwed up, right? Like Superwoman is begging Owlman, and like it's kind of crazy, but like Superwoman's married to Ultraman, so it's kind of a weird, finicky scenario. But like basically what Jonathan says is that as time progressed, what he began to realize is that whenever Ultraman showed up and started like complaining and crying about his life, that he would in turn like take off and then he would vanish for some measure of time. And so the way that Bendis kind of depicts Ultraman here is that like the hardcore evil perception of himself that basically we've consistently seen is a sham, that the guy's basically a coward on the inside, that like instead of confronting his problems head on, he just cries about them. Like he just whines about how bad things are and then never does anything to fix it, which is kind of interesting to basically portray him as essentially a coward, right? Like, because it's kind of a cowardly thing. Like, man, the world's been really mean to me and I'm just going to sit here and cry instead of like bucking up and trying to do something to fix it. Like it really is kind of like an indication of cowardice. And it's kind of cool to see that kind of flip on the character of Ultraman. There'll be some who disagree with it, but I actually like that development of him. I think that's one of the cool things that kind of goes into it. But Jonathan uses this chance and basically says like, this is my way to get out of here. It's my chance to escape. And so using what little energy he has left, basically makes his escape out of there and then takes off to like one of the cities that he can use to find the location of the Crime Syndicate, at least their main base of operations. And as he goes through there, he begins to learn what Earth 3 is like. That basically it's a place of suffering, right? Like it's one of these things where it's like the only people who deserve to survive are the ones who can survive. If you can't make it on your own, that's your problem. There's no lending, there's no helping hand, there's no one there to like make things easier for you. That it's literally a screwed up and terrible place where people struggle day in and day out. That's basically what it is. That where they would normally look to superheroes to protect them, instead the superheroes are there to like basically serve out their own ends. It's a terrible place to live in. Now that aspect of Earth 3 we've known for a long time, right? Like that's not new. That's not a Brian Michael Bendis thing. We always knew that like Earth, the planet Earth in the Earth 3 universe was basically like a twisted evil version of the main DC universe. But it's also kind of cool to see this sort of little bit of an expansion here. To see this kind of a little bit of a light shining on this small little segment of this universe. Again, never really understood why DC never seemed to explore it. I think it'd make for an amazing series. I think it'd make for more than a few volumes. Again, write it like Injustice Gods Among Us and then make it in continuity. But when Superboy, when Jonathan shows up to the main base of operations for the Crime Syndicate trying to find a way out, he encounters Superwoman, who of course again is Lois Lane in Earth 3. And so this basically kind of leaves off with him, presumably going to have to face off against his mom, which is kind of cool. At least it's Earth 3 version of his mom. But it's kind of interesting because like the experience that John's going through is as much one about like mental torment as it is about like, hey, you're becoming a much stronger version of yourself. But one of the things I hope you guys are also noticing here is that it's actually kind of screwing John up. It's kind of messing him up in terms of his perception of the world and everything that goes along with it. But with that being said, guys, we're gonna go ahead and bring this video to an end. If you are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoy this video, make sure you drop a like, and I will catch you all later. Peace.